Welcome, everybody, into another edition of Warm Weather Fans, the Sunbelt podcast. My name is Brian Stone, joined solo this week by Zeke Palermo. Matt Miguez is wrapped up with something. I don't really understand what. Zeke, before we kind of get into pleasantries, I want to do some announcements or just the things we do at the end of the show at the
Yeah.
beginning, because I don't frankly think people are listening all the way to the very end. Number one, if anybody ever has questions or wants to write into the show, please do so. warmweatherfans@gmail.com. We'd love to field questions, comments, anything from the people that listen to this, as well as make sure you're following all of our socials. We are also now on YouTube. All of our episodes are available via video as well. Warm Weather Fans. It's youtube.com/at Warm Weather Fans is the actual URL. You type that in, and I also include that all of that information, the audio description of each podcast catcher. So no matter if you're listening to it on Apple, Spotify, you should be able to find all that information pretty easily. Once again, Brian Stone here. Zeke, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I dodged a bullet not having Matt here this week. I I was prepared to have my defenses high. As we talked about last week, he and I are two extremes, and then Brian, you land somewhere in the middle on most takes. I can be a little more on the offensive this week, like I was last time. I was ready to play some very very defensive, work my way out of some situations today. So
Well, it's not that I'm like in the middle on most takes. It's that like I will say something that I feel like everyone universally agrees with, and one of you takes the opposite side of that. Like last week when Matt was giving like a full throated defense of Butch Jones's coaching career, I'm like, dude, you're never gonna sell me on this. Like, I'm sorry. I like that. I like the offense they had. I, you're never gonna sell me on Butch Jones is actually a great coach. He just has never really proved it. And I'm like, wow, what a case to be made. Um, anyway, we're here to talk about the week 3 games in the Sun Belt. We will make picks on week 4 against the spread, over-unders, all of that sort of jazz. Let's go ahead and get started here. So last Thursday, September 12th, we had Texas State play Arizona State in San Marcos. Arizona State comes away late with the 31-28 win. Zeke, I know that with your new job setup that you work like nights and are on the high school sports beat. So I don't know if you were working that night or if you caught the full version of this game, but I watched probably 80% of this game.
hmm
I just was like, Bills Dolphins. I've seen this play out a million times. This just doesn't have my attention. I really liked what I saw out of both of these teams on Thursday. I think they're both really fun teams. I had not watched any Arizona State up to this point because, frankly, like we're not a what a conference are they even in anymore? American Big 12.
I think they might be Big 12 these days.
Okay, so I don't watch a lot of Big 12 football anymore. Not since the Texas Oklahoma all of that blew up. I was really impressed by the way both teams played. Honestly, you would never see it on the like page, but I thought despite all the offense this game had, I thought the defensive lines did a great job of kind of getting in both Sam Levitt and Jordan McLeod's faces. I felt like even on plays where, okay, so Texas State had 3 sacks as a team, Arizona State only had 1, but it felt like even when these teams were making positive plays, someone was having to dodge an oncoming rusher in order to get a throw off. And I was like, as offensive as this game is, the defensive lines have really kind of controlled a lot of what's gone on here. So I know you're probably still reeling. You were all in for a full 12-0 season Sun Belt sweep.
hmm
Now we're at 11-1. The scenario that I sort of laid out last week with the loss to Arizona State versus Boise's loss to Oregon is now in play as well. Take me through kind of the stages of grief you went through as this game was unfolding.
So this was, as you mentioned, running at the same time as Bills Dolphins, which had my eyes as a Bills fan. So I was flipping between the two. But very quickly I realized that this was going to be the more interesting game. Tua, God bless that guy's health, exposed himself as the fraud that I've known he is. Um,
Really,
but
I thought it was more that he turned his own brain into goop, but I
I
digress.
anyway, I like your take there on the defensive lines, because I thought Texas State had several opportunities late in the game. They had 2 drives late in the fourth that probably could have ended up in touchdown had it not been for Arizona State's defensive line. Jordan McLeod loaded up on one of those late drives and threw like a 40-yard pass that was frankly not a great pass right into Arizona State defensive back to turn the ball over. And then on the second of the 2 late fourth quarter drives, I think it was their last possession of the game. Fourth and maybe 4 after calling a pitch play out of the shotgun on 3rd and 2, which I thought was kind of a bizarre play call. Arizona State doesn't give Jordan McLeod time for much to develop. He has to throw to a covered receiver and falls incomplete. I'm still on Texas State to win the belt. That doesn't change for me here. I think that ultimately what spelled this team was just meeting a team that is offensively gifted as them. Just couldn't win the guns race, and I'm okay with that. Again, I'm disappointed because I do believe Texas State is certainly a top 3 G5 team this year. I really do believe that. And I know that maybe a reduced take from my, oh, well, they're going to make the playoffs in the past. But in all sincerity, Texas State is a top 3 team minimum in the G5. And I think they should have won this game, and just ultimately an inability to score late cost them here.
Well, I'll say this. So both teams kind of struggled running the football. And to kind of further illustrate the point that I made about the defensive lines earlier, between the two teams, there was combined 14 tackles for loss, which you don't get unless, like I said, the front 7 or the front 4 rather of one or both of these teams is just living in the backfield. I mean, we talked about it. Ismail Mahdi is like one of the most electric players, regardless of position, in the Sun Belt. They held him to 68 yards on 14 carries. He was very efficient, 5 yards a carry, but it wasn't the ripping off huge chunk plays that we kind of come to expect from a running back of that caliber. And again, I haven't watched a lot of Arizona State. I want to preface this when I say that. The hype that I saw before and during the game about this Cam Scatabo or whatever his name is, dude, the guy averaged 2.6 yards per carry. He had 24 carries for 62 yards. Now, I do want to give credit. Again, the defensive line for Texas State played very well, but I'm like, where is this hype coming from? If he's Ashton Janty, that's one thing. But I was just like, yeah, this guy's a nice little running back. Like, where is all? I don't understand why everybody's like, "Ooh, now you're in trouble. You got to face Cam," and it's like, he's fine. Like, I don't get it.
I couldn't tell you what it was people liked about him as well. He was a finalist for like a all around award, someone that best pass catcher / kick returner / running back last year. My biggest takeaway was anytime I heard his name, I kind of grimaced and I was like, is that a word we're allowed to say?
Scatabo sounds like something like a serial killer does to a cat, like before he like progresses up to like people. So, but yeah, I mean, again, Jordan McLeod played very well in this game. 29 of 44, 268, 4 touchdowns. You mentioned the interception. I mean, that was just bad timing, bad decision. All of the above. But again, was very decisive with a number of rushers coming free right in his face all night. And, to complete basically 3/4 of your passes is pretty damn good, all things considered. So, I, I mean, he was not the reason they lost this game. It was sort of just the inability to not turn the ball over at the worst possible time. And,
Mhm.
you know, there were just drives where it was just like the pass for Arizona State was just working. And like there's really nothing. I mean, I think we highlighted going into this season like one of our biggest concerns about Texas State is number one their defense, but one of the biggest concerns about their defense is the secondary. Like I don't think we knew a single one of these guys' names off the top of our head like before the preview started. And I don't even think Phil Steele, like when we were doing the preview episode, like called any of these guys out and was like, hey, this is somebody to watch for. So
Yeah.
that kind of reared its ugly head. Now they did pick off Levitt for the Sun Devils once. But yeah, it just ultimately wasn't enough. But again, I liked the effort Texas State gave. I have no problems with them just coming up like a little short against a former Pac-12, now Big 12 school at home. You know, those
Yep.
are those are the ones that you're going to kick yourself, but in the end, you're like, I think we're going to be glad we faced kind of this test at this point, especially before conference play starts.
Mhm.
So with that, Arizona State moves to 3-0, and Texas State drops to 2-1. Real quick, when we can breeze past because of both the nature of the game and the score, South Alabama absolutely crushes Northwestern State 87-10. I believe I saw that it was the most points scored at an FBS game since like 1991 or something. So that
Mhm.
predates my existence. So that should tell you it's a long time. Um, Gio Lopez came back. He played well, obviously. Fluff Bothwell, 143 yards, 2 touchdowns. So I I don't have a lot to highlight because again, it's whatever. Like it's great that they won, but I did think the final score I kept rubbing my eyes at the end of the game being at the Texas State or Arizona State game being like, is that score right? Like did they misplace a 7? Like what's going on here?
No, I mean, they scored 20 at least 24 points in all but the final quarter. I've and we saw a 70-point game from Arkansas State last year. I've never seen
Mhm.
a game like this. I suppose what you just said backs that up, highest scoring game. This was incredible. And I, like you, did not care to watch it because very quickly we realized what was happening, and also I just didn't have the facilities to watch it, a game against Northwestern State. But I I that was just I I don't know. I'm not reading too much into it, especially after how South Al started the year 0-2. Um, but you got momentum now, I suppose.
Well, we'll see how that all plays out because they get
Yep.
App State this week, so this is going to be start to be the real kind of litmus test as to where they stand as a team. The two losses were tough. Lopez didn't play in the one because he had turf toe, but then he comes back in this one and they put up 87, which is a good accomplishment. But again,
Mhm.
you got to consider the level of competition. South Alabama is now 1-2 with the victory. Northwestern State drops to 0-3. Um, Getting into this next one here, I'm sure you were a little disappointed by the ultimate result, right?
Yeah.
Michigan beats Arkansas State, but only by 10. In a game that Arkansas State never really pushed Michigan, really. Like it
Mhm.
was, and I texted you guys this on Saturday, and Matt, agreed with me, and I'm sure you agreed to some extent. The opening drive for Arkansas State to move the ball down the field on their opening drive at will in the big house against Michigan in front of 120 or 110 or however many people, thousand people, and to just pull up and settle for 3 on like a 4th and 1 or whatever was insane to me. Like again, I texted you guys this and I'm telling the audience now for the first time. If you're coaching that way against like Old Dominion,
Mhm.
sure. Like if you feel good about your defense, don't do that. Don't do that crap against Michigan at the Big House. Like, that is coaching scared. There's no point. Like, you are not favored to win this game. So quit playing it as if, like, hey, we'll hold them to 3 next time down. No, you won't. What makes you think that you would?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to let you kind of say your 2 cents. I have a very strong reason why I think this game was as close as it was, but give me sort of your thoughts before I go in on that.
Well, we can't look over the fact that Michigan has a quarterback problem.
Oh
Davis
yeah.
Warren, good job, man. You went 11 for 14. Your 3 incompletions though were interceptions. And I'm not
He's
going to say the
terrible.
how. I
He's
mean,
terrible.
think about the complaints people had about JJ McCarthy and how he just never threw the ball. But at least he didn't turn the ball over. Uh,
Yeah.
I think the Arkansas State, though, for a team, and again, I will concede here that it was Michigan, who at the time was very highly ranked, has dropped down to like 18, somewhere in that range. 3 interceptions forced, scored only 3 points off of that. Arkansas State could feasibly have won this game if they didn't, I think, go 3 and out after one of the other interceptions, and then after the final Warren interception, Jalen Rayner threw his own interception right back within like 3 plays. Also, I'll point out here, Arkansas State, most of their points came on their final 2 drives. This was not a Michigan State, Arkansas State battle all the way. It was, or I'm sorry, Michigan, Arkansas State battle all the way. It was rather Michigan just like kind of couldn't break away. They had the lead. They were going to win the whole time, but couldn't break away, let Arkansas State score late. I'm impressed by the resolve. I'm impressed by, the intangible hand wavy stuff that comes with playing a much higher stature team this close. But Arkansas State, I've been told to believe in their offense, and you scored 3 points on 3 interceptions. I think this was a missed opportunity again. Like, I don't think Arkansas State was ever going to win this game. And I imagine if they turn one of those interceptions into a touchdown, one of the forced interceptions into a touchdown, I imagine Michigan comes out with a little more aggression, and does not just only put up 28. Uh, I It's hard to say unimpressed when you lose to Michigan by 10. This was a better than expected performance than Arkansas State, and I do not want to downplay how well comparative to expectation that they played against a team again that was in the national championship, Michigan. But and again, you knew the butt was coming. I For a team that I've been told to be convinced on because of their ability to score points. I mean, 3 interceptions and you only put 3 points there is really damning for me. And again, most of those points only came late in the 4th when, frankly, it was 28-3 already.
Well, I think a large part of it is just kind of level of competition, right?
Yeah.
Like, coming into this game, there was a reason that Arkansas State was what, a 3-4 touchdown underdog. I don't remember the final number. But yeah, I just feel Michigan has more pieces left over from last year on the defensive side of the ball than they do on offense. Their
Mhm.
offense is like, from last year's team, the only real contributor that I see on the offensive side for Michigan is Donovan Edwards, who went crazy last year in the national championship game. But other than that, like, I don't like what I've seen out of Davis Warren. I've watched him play Texas, and I've watched him play Arkansas State now. There's a reason that they've already moved on and have named Alex Orji the starter for this week.
Mhm.
So, like, that should kind of tell you where they're at quarterback wise. Like you said, you would love to have JJ McCarthy back at this stage, and I'm sure, given his knee injury, he and being behind a now recently hot Sam Darnold, I'm sure he'd love to be back in Ann Arbor throwing balls. But yeah, it was just a weird game all around. Michigan, I stopped watching this game at halftime because Michigan went up 21-3,
Mm-hmm.
and then I checked in on it in the third quarter and no points were scored, and I was like, whatever, it is what it is. And then I saw the final score when Matt sent to our group like, hey, Arkansas State just lost by 10, and I'm like, there's no way that's possible. Like, I watched after that first drive, it seemed like Arkansas State couldn't do anything right offensively.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think a lot of it is due to level of competition. Like, you can really tell the difference between a Big Ten level defense and what we see in the Sun Belt. I feel like that gets really pushed up, in a game like this. So, I mean, Jalen Rader didn't play well, but again, he's not really facing this caliber of defense at all. Not even every single week. Like, we just don't have this level of defense in this conference. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, I feel like offensively you got to throw it out a little bit. It was obviously good defensively that they picked Davis Warren off enough times to stay in this game, but I just simply don't think he's very good. Like,
No.
the run defense, I think, was very concerning. I think moving forward for Arkansas State, they gave Kalel Mullings 153 yards on 15 carries, 2 touchdowns. His longest carry was only 38 yards of that. So, I mean, he was still racking up yards on really high efficiency. So, I think that's got to be kind of your takeaway is, defensively, if you're Arkansas State and you already know what teams want to do to you and you still can't really put up a fight, then you're in deep. Like, you need to then you have real problems. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll see if that kind of continues through conference play when it picks up for them. But I, I guess I was encouraged by the fact that they didn't just totally duck out of this game and find a way to lose, 45-3, given the
Mm-hmm.
way that it was heading at halftime. But with that, Michigan is now 2-1 this season, and Arkansas State drops to 2-1. Getting into this next one here, I didn't think this game was going to end up being as close as it was. Coastal Carolina goes on the road and only edges out Temple by 8 points. I believe, let me double check this. They were 17.5 point favorites on the road.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we've given Coastal and I know this is tough to say because they haven't lost yet, but maybe we've given them a little too much leeway and kind of put too much on their plate as far as what they could potentially accomplish, because you go through their like previous, performances, and it's just kind of like, like, it's
Mm-hmm.
fine. Like, you guys are finding a way to win games, but you're Vasco is not been, kind of what we expected. Um, I mean, to have 15 completions for 103 yards is like baffling. Like, those are, no offense, they're like Bryce Young type numbers in the
Yeah.
NFL, like Bo Nix. So, like, that is concerning. Obviously, he has the running capability. He had 92 yards rushing in this game. Um, but yeah, it's like, if they can't throw the ball effectively, and the only person who can really rip off any yardage is Vasco, it's gonna get hard come conference time, because that's the what they've done the last 2 weeks, specifically against William and Mary and now Temple, that is not going to translate. So
Mm-hmm.
they need to figure it out ASAP if they want to win some conference games this year.
I think the biggest issue that Coastal is facing right now is the lack of anyone that can really make a big playmaker, if you
Yeah,
will. Um, because again, Vasco's yardage numbers were kind of abysmal. I don't know how you can put up those kind of numbers completing 15 passes, only 100 yards, is kind of baffling. But he did it on high efficiency, which means he's getting the ball in guys' hands and they're just not doing anything with it. Same thing in the run game. Ethan Vasco is not Zion Chris. It is not sustainable for him to lead your team in passing and in rushing every week.
yeah,
Um, that is not the kind of quarterback that he is. That is not his skill set. And he led this team in rushing as a matter of happenstance than a matter of ability. I think Coastal is just really suffering more so than it did last year because they still had some of the bones of like the Grayson McCall, Sam Pinckney was still there. Like they still had some of those guys. Um, this team is suffering from the coaching change this year more than it was last year. And it appears evident. They're still 3-0. This is not to take away from them. They are still 3-0, including like the win against Jacksonville State. Although Jacksonville State is in shambles to a level that we did not anticipate.
See that's the thing for me now is you open the season scoring 55 points, and we all kind of sat back and was like, hey, there's a lot we did right here that you can build on. But now it's just kind of like we saw how bad Jacksonville State and specifically their quarterback situation is horrific. So when you face a team that maybe has one of the worst quarterback situations in the country, okay, you can maybe extrapolate a little bit from that, but not very much now that you sort of know that. And then you get an FCS team in William and Mary, and then you get Temple, who's 0-3, and you barely beat them by 8 points, and your quarterback doesn't break 110 yards passing. So like, and the thing too is, I feel like it's going to be weeks before we even kind of know what what Coastal Carolina team we have, because this week they play Virginia, and then the week after they play Old Dominion, and that game might finish 3-0 based on the way these two offenses have played. Like that game might be first one to score wins. So it's going to be a while before we see them play a team where you're like, I'd like to see literally what kind of fight they put up against, an equal or way better team.
Yeah. They'll get that against James Madison, but like you said, that's not for 3 weeks. That's a whole month away.
Well, that's the thing. Will they against James Madison? Have we been super thrilled with what we've seen from James Madison lately?
No, but I think that's appropriate considering we've not been thrilled by Coastal either.
Yeah, I mean, I think Old Dominion will be a really good barometer, because I feel like these teams, now that we've seen them over the first 3 weeks, are very similar in that iffy quarterback situation, don't have a ton of explosive weapons on the offensive side of the ball, and kind of just want to play really conservative and not make their quarterbacks make a lot of plays. So that's why I said again, first team to score 3 points may win this game. Like, who knows? So
here's something I want you to chew on as we go through the rest of these games, and we'll readdress it once we've done the recaps. Is who do you think that we as a collective or as a community, or even you personally, were wrong about the most? Like, who has moved the needle in one way or the direction the most? As we get through kind of the rest of these games, I want you to be thinking about that, because I think Coastal is certainly like top 3 in that regard.
Can I go ahead and answer now?
Yeah.
I think it's James Madison.
That's probably it.
Like, I didn't have super high expectations for them to begin with, but we talked about the schedule is so easy. Like, and even with that, they still are kind of struggling. So, like, what do you, we all universally agreed, like, we didn't have a lot of high hopes for Troy. And they've proven us, largely correct. So I don't think that we were way off on them. South Alabama, going the other way, I think the team we've been lower than marking on that we maybe should have been higher was kind of ULM. Like, they've already kind of topped where I thought they would be 3 games into the season. And like, I know they haven't played the greatest level of competition, but I mean, look at where they started and look at where they are now. So like, it's one of those where it's like any progress is good progress.
Yeah.
All right. So Coastal, despite, playing a pretty shaky game overall, is now 3-0 this season. Temple drops to 0-3. Troy decided that the time to start showing up for games at least, through halftime of this game was at Kinnick Stadium playing against Iowa. So they lose 38-10. Iowa outscores Troy 28-7 in the second half to pull out the 17-point victory. They benched Goose Crowder for this game. Caldwell was the full-time starter. I told you guys, like, when I was watching them, who did they play the week before?
They
I can't.
had Memphis last week.
Right. So Memphis, that was another situation of you guys are overmatched and you're kicking field goals. You're answering sevens with threes, basically. And like I felt that way about Butch Jones at Arkansas State this week. If these teams are going to play not to lose every week, I can't do it with them. Like at some point, you got to kind of put your foot down and say, hey, like, we're going to have to be a little aggressive. Like, we can't just be passive all the time. So Troy, again, falls 38-21. Caldwell started 14 of 21, 156 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. They couldn't run the ball. Devontae Ross did all of their damage. Troy offensively, 5 catches for 142 yards and 2 scores. But yeah, I mean, Caleb Johnson for Iowa just absolutely crushed them on the ground. So once again, we're back to Troy's defense. We hardly knew ye because it's gone now, dude. Like it's starting over from scratch again.
Yeah, they looked solid in the first half. They had a 14-10 lead going into half, but ultimately, this was frustrating because, again, I don't think that a win was necessarily in the cards, even up 14-10 at half. But I needed a better second half performance. They just kind of sputtered out. You'd think a team playing Big Ten Iowa, who Iowa up until this year, Iowa and Troy were kind of the P5 G5 mirrors of one another, where their ideal game was a 13-7 win. And Iowa has turned that around. They're still performing defensively very well, but now have an offense to speak of. Troy, on the other hand, has regressed back into kind of shambles of where they were prior to this kind of most recent run. I don't know. I don't have a ton to say about this one just because it feels this is what was anticipated. Troy was fighting until Matthew Caldwell's 1 interception was returned for a touchdown. That turned the game around in Iowa's favor. Iowa scored, I think, 3 touchdowns after that on 3 possessions, or some crazy efficiency in that regard. Yeah, I to answer the question we just kind of discussed, I was higher on Troy than I should have been. I thought, much like the transition that Coastal had last year, when I said like the bones of that Coastal team was still intact last year, and then they kind of fell apart, I anticipated something similar here from Troy, where I thought that there was going to be enough left over to sustain this team around 500. And I'm starting to really, really question that. I think when we get into Sunbelt play for Troy, they may overperform as compared to this start, just because they are playing in the West and are drawing a relatively easy schedule for the compared to what it could have been. But I don't have a ton to add novelty wise about this one.
Well, I don't know about that, what you just said about Troy getting into Sunbelt play, because I mean, when you go through and look at their schedule, right? Even the games that we originally came into this season thinking, oh, Troy will win that. Now those, based on the way that they've played in the first 3 weeks, are totally up in the air. Like, okay, in 2 weeks they play UL Monroe. UL Monroe's been pretty good. Like, do you feel confident saying, yeah, they're gonna pick up a win over UL Monroe? Then this is their conference schedule this year. I want to try to read it as slowly as possible. Okay, so in 2 weeks they play UL Monroe. The week after that they get Texas State at home. They're not winning that game. The week after that they go to South Alabama. on a Thursday, I believe. That potentially could be a win. But if Gio Lopez scores points, who's going to match that output for Troy offensively?
Mm-hmm.
Like we know that Gio Lopez can put points up. We do not know that anybody for Troy can do that yet. Then you play at Arkansas State. Say what you want, Zeke. I know you're not the biggest fan. They can
Mm-hmm.
score points. Like, it is what it is. Coastal, they're going to want to play like we said, probably a really conservative game, keep Troy off the field, and Troy has to make the most of the limited opportunities they get anyway because they're just simply not very good offensively. At Georgia Southern, we know Southern's going to score points. Do we know Troy's going to be able to either stop that, or are they going to be able to match? Probably not. At Louisiana in the second to last game of the season, 2 days before Thanksgiving, Louisiana is probably going to blow them off the map. And then you end with Southern Miss, which feels like the only layup left other than Florida A&M this coming week.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sorry, Troy fans, but you guys have had a really great run this last couple years, and now it's like time to pay the piper a little bit.
Sure.
So, again, 2 Sun Belt titles. John Summerall was the absolute man, and now it's like, hey, we're starting way over again, and I don't even know if Gerard Parker is like the right guy for the job 3 games into the season. So, I
I'll
mean,
jump. I'll jump the gun.
let
How
me
do you go ahead?
well, let me ask you this. Matt and I talked about this the episode that you missed. So
Mm-hmm.
Gerard Parker comes from Notre Dame, right? Like
Yeah.
he was the offensive coordinator. Has Notre Dame's offense ever scared you? Have you ever thought it was entertaining? Like, I can't personally remember the last time that I thought Notre Dame's offense was good or entertaining.
I can't remember a time I've thought Notre Dame was a good team. I mean,
Well, I
is
mean,
there a
right now they have a very good defense, like
yeah.
the way that it stands right now, but it always feels like, okay, we're deficient at the quarterback position. It always
Mm-hmm.
feels like they're treading water at quarterback. I can't remember the last time they've had it. Brady Quinn maybe was the last time they had a good quarterback, and that was 17 years ago. I mean, if you want to throw Ian Book in there,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, like, it is what it is. But again, their offense has always been single back, 2 tight end sets. We run the football and take time off the clock and play defense. Like, but what about that? What do you watch about that offensively and go, I want a piece of that?
I don't know.
And they have NFL caliber players playing for them every week. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Troy doesn't have that luxury. There's no Kyron Williams that's like, hey, guess what? I played at Troy. There's no, Michael Mayer or whoever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be tough running this scheme with like not NFL caliber talent. So I don't know.
Yeah, I no, I agree with you. I think I don't believe that there's a single team in all of college football that rides legacy more than Notre Dame. Um, and so I don't know. It was a sexy hire um, at first glance, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. They've got to show up against Florida A&M. Again, I'll jump the gun. We'll talk about it more later, but they need to show out against A&M, or Parker could be a 1-year guy.
I don't necessarily think it's that bad,
Mm-hmm.
but I just mean like long term when you look like 2 years down the road, what's more likely from what you've seen at this point? Not even just from like a production perspective, but again, you played Memphis last week and you were kicking field goals when you were down 24 at
Mm-hmm.
one point. Like, you turned a 3-score game into a 3-score game. Congrats. Like, I don't really know what to make of that. So I think if you're not going to coach this team aggressively and try to take some chances, then why even bother? Because again, you're not getting NFL caliber talent the way that Notre Dame does.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what to make of this. But anyway, Iowa moves to 2-1 with the victory. Troy is now 0-3 this season. Another game that was closer than I thought it was going to be, actually. App State edges out East Carolina by 2 points. I mean, I know App State had to go in there on the road. Um, App State continues to kind of struggle to run the ball effectively, which is very not App State of them.
Mhm.
Usually they are just cramming the ball down other teams' throats. And in this one, it was like Anderson Castle, 17 carries, 40 yards. Kanye Roberts, 5 carries, 15 yards. Amani Marshall, 4 carries, 8 yards. That is very not what we've come to expect out of App. And it feels like Joey Aguilar now has to put the offense on his back on a weekly basis to give them a chance to win. Do you agree
Yeah.
with that?
That's what it's shaping up to be, which is disappointing because App has consistently produced some of the most uh efficient, I don't know, it's not voluptuous, but to have the most volume, voluminous,
Volumi
perhaps? Is that
voluminous?
is that the right word? They've produced some incredible running backs over the past several years, and that's kind of been my impression of the Sean Clark App teams is that they've got a guy that's going to run for 1,000 yards, and everything else can kind of change, but that's going to be consistent. They are not going to have that this year. Anderson Castle has not crossed 100 yards this year. There was even in the opener, he wasn't the team's leading rusher, so there's questions if he's even the guy or if they're going to continue to really split. I liked in this game against East Carolina that he did get more volume. In the first two games, a gripe I had with App was that they weren't giving anybody the chance to be the guy in that backfield. It's falling to Joey Aguilar, but he's doing it pretty well. 2 picks is not great, but two touchdowns to go with it and 400 yards. Uh, we knew going in that Joey Aguilar was one of the best quarterbacks in the conference. So it's just going to be a matter of time, like how long can they ride that? Because realistically, they should have beat East Carolina by more than 2 points. This is not a scary East Carolina team that's dominating the American Conference. Yeah, so I think all in all, the question about App going forward is how long can Joey Aguilar sustain these heroics while App tries to figure out its running game?
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
And it may be too early to make this call, but I just want to put the question out.
Hmm.
Did maybe we got did we maybe get a little too far out ahead of ourselves with the App love? Like, and I only say that in comparison to the rest of the teams in the conference. Like, I know they got absolutely railroaded last week by Clemson, but the inability to run the football effectively kind of makes them a one-dimensional offense. And I think defensively still like, they're very good, but we kind of crowned them a little bit. Like it was going to be App coming out of the East. It was going to be, take your pick of Texas State or Louisiana coming out of the West.
Hmm.
Like that was pretty much the consensus. And now it feels like, hey, if they can't run the football and it's all on Joey Aguilar every week, it's like, okay, but is he going to throw for 420 yards every single Saturday to keep them in games? I mean, they won by 2 points and he threw for almost 430 yards. Like,
This may be revisionist, so I'll have to go back and rewatch the episodes to really figure out what it was that we said and planted our flag on. But I wouldn't say that we crowned App, but rather we defaulted to App because other than Southern and James Madison, we were kind of high on James. Who did we like out of the East? The East is not that strong, so it's not like we said
Co-
App is the clear.
Coastal.
Coastal, maybe. Coastal was kind of in the same ballpark conversation as JMU, where we were kind of tepid on them. Like they could be good. They could overperform their over under. Um, so yeah, I think App at at this point in the season is still my favorite to win the East. But that's not to say that they're the best team in the East. I just think
Mm-hmm.
of all the teams in the East, they are the best if that tracks at all. Brian? Brian, you cut out?
Okay. So I think my concern is more of, well, I'll go ahead and say this. As it stands today, I think Texas State has taken the crown as the best team in the conference.
Mhm.
Um, and until something happens in conference play to get me to think otherwise, I'm going to continue to believe that. I do think the lack of a running game consistently is should be very concerning for App, because when things weren't, on the off chance that things weren't working passing game wise for Aguilar on the running backs to make a difference. Now you don't. All right, apologies, we're having some technical difficulties, but I I think the concern is that Aguilar doesn't have the running game to fall back upon. And I don't know if that's going to be a huge issue moving forward, especially when you play some of these really tight conference games where, the game might be a little closer than you think. But I think there needs to be some area of concern. I don't know if it's the offensive line for App that just isn't getting, sort of the leverage and the push that they did last year, or if the Kanye Roberts, Amani Marshall, Anderson Castle triumvirate has taken a step back. I don't know, but
Mhm.
they really do need to show that they can be able to run the ball when they absolutely need to, because being one dimensional in this conference is it's very tough to overcome. So we'll see how all that goes. Anyway, East Carolina drops to 2-1, and App State improves to 2-1 with the App State victory. Um, all right, getting into this next one here. So Virginia Tech pulls away from Old Dominion late, wins 37-17. It was 14-10 Virginia Tech at half, and then they outscored Old Dominion in the second half 23-7. Um, yeah, I guess I was off on the spread. I guess I expected Virginia Tech to jump on them earlier and make like a real dent like in the first half. And they
Mhm.
came alive in the second half, but they just didn't have the lead in place that I kind of thought was going to happen. I again, I don't know how much there is to take away from this game if you root for Old Dominion, or you want to take our thoughts on Old Dominion, but it's like, dude, this offense is a mess. To say it's a mess is kind of an understatement. Your leading passer had 38 yards in this game.
Mhm.
Quinn Hinnicle, I guess is how you pronounce it. Uh, as a team, two quarterbacks combined to go 6 of 14 for 50 yards passing in a game where you could not really afford to just run the ball every single play. Like, you are not explosive enough offensively to make that work. So their leading receiver had 2 catches.
It's
Like,
how many
what do you do
we're
with
gonna
that?
just sing we're gonna sing the same song every year, every week, and we sang it every week last year. This Old Dominion team is without offensive talent at any position. It I was impressed by their ability to hold Virginia Tech, a team that I will admit notably likes to play down, especially against Sunbelt teams. For whatever reason, their AD has something going on. He loves to play Sunbelt teams. Um, old Old Dominion is just not a talented football team, right? And
No.
we've said it. We said it in the preview. We're gonna keep saying it, and I'm gonna bore everyone with this, but it's just like that's Old Dominion. They're here for other sports. You got to feel the football team. Like there are teams like ULM where in recent years they've been dog, but we've seen ULM play football at a high level before. We've seen that team be a relevant football program. Old Dominion, That is not the case. Old Dominion is it's like, and again, to jump, it's like having Vanderbilt in the SEC is like, someone's got to be there. Someone's got to be the 14th team. I don't know. I didn't
See,
learn much. I didn't learn anything from this just because this is what we knew.
I liken them more to, if you want to make the SEC comparison, I liken them more to like a Mississippi State,
Mm-hmm.
where there's a clear cap and ceiling on this team. And sometimes they'll have a season or two where you're like, oh, they're making some headway. And then other times, other seasons, you're just like, this team is dog water. Like kind of you said, like it's really tough because it's like, how are you expected to compete and you don't have a single offensive contributor you can rely on?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you do with that? So, and I get it. Grant Wilson didn't play, but to have your leading passer have 38 yards and you have 50 yards passing as a team in a game where, I mean, especially late, Virginia Tech put up 17 in the fourth quarter. Like, that would have been the time to just kind of uncork it and just be like, whatever. This game is a loss either way. Like, unless Ricky Ronnie's worrying about covering the spread, like I don't really see the value in playing a very conservative type game. I think, again, Old Dominion Coastal is going to be raced to score who scores 10 points, I think.
Yeah.
Because neither one of these teams want to open the playbook up. So I don't know what to say. Um I know in the preseason one of our listeners who's an Old Dominion fan was very upset because we messed up one of the results of their games last year, and he was like, "We were in all these one-score games. Not this year, dude." I think that's donezo. If you don't have a quarterback that can throw for 50 yards, I don't know what to tell you. Like, unless you're running the old like Army Navy triple option, and you're not. So I don't really know what to make of this. So anyway, Virginia Tech moves to 2-1 with the victory. Old Dominion is now 0-3 this season. Getting into, we can kind of skip this. Georgia Southern played South Carolina State. They won 42-14. I was not overly thrilled with the run defense still for Georgia Southern. There were many times where South Carolina State's quarterback would just scramble around and there was just nobody there to tackle him. And even to the point where I tweeted, how many times can you watch this guy scramble with no intention of throwing the ball and not have a dedicated spy? And multiple people responded to me who are Georgia Southern fans with the exact same response as, this is what happens when you don't have a real defensive coordinator. And I was like, correct. That is
Mm-hmm.
what happens. But I mean, all in all, they won the game. Whatever. They beat HBCU. Good for them. Georgia Southern's 2-1. South Carolina State's now 1-2. I'm going to give you the floor for this one. Georgia State upsets Vanderbilt in Center Park. Vanderbilt felt like they had the lead late, and then Georgia State just kind of went out and grabbed it from them. So kind of walk me through this one.
So, first of all, you have to point out that this is Georgia State's second SEC win. Beat Tennessee back a couple years ago, almost 10 years ago now. Congratulations. They own the state of Tennessee when it comes to SEC play. I mean, Georgia State, what really stood out to me about Georgia State is that this is what Del McGee can provide, right? Is he can get guys to buy in for this game. Vanderbilt's coach came out afterwards. I don't think it was the post-game presser, but like his weekly, the coach's presser thing. And he pretty much summed up what I thought was the case with this game. Vanderbilt just fell for the trap. Vanderbilt was kind of outperforming what you'd expect from them in the first several weeks. Came into Center Park and kind of crapped the bed. The only reason this game even came so close is because they scored 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, 22 points, which worries me a little, but not a ton as a Georgia State fan. Georgia State showed up for this game in a way that I've not seen them show up for a Power 5, let alone an out-of-conference game in a minute. This was an excellent performance. Again, I think Vanderbilt is a lot to blame here, more so than Georgia State. I thought a lot of Georgia State's scores came on like foolish mistakes, especially like defensive blown coverages. Georgia State scored a safety because it was either a kick or a punt. On a kick, Vanderbilt's backup returner took the ball, took it out of the end zone, and then back in, and then kneeled it for a safety, which again is just like stupid stuff. If you're not ready for the moment, why are you even there?
The
I
crazy thing is too, isn't the rule that you can call fair catch anywhere inside like the 20 and they'll put it on the 25 for you?
If it was a kickoff, yes. I don't remember if it was a kickoff or punt off
Oh,
rip.
okay.
If
Okay.
it's a kickoff, yes. If it's a punt, no, you've got to catch it.
No, I know.
Regard
I thought you said kickoff. Sorry.
It's one of the two. I don't know. Obviously, it was one of the two, but I'm not sure. I think regardless, though, if you're gonna end up kneeling it, just let it bounce.
Let it bounce.
If you're in the anyway, um, I think in terms of the long term, like what does this mean for Georgia State moving forward? It's that again to hype up Del McGee. This guy has acquired talent that this program has transferred in talent that this program would have never known about previously. Ted Hurst, namely leading receiver, he came in from Valdosta. Team's leading tackler, Xavier Wilson might be his name. It's escaping me in this moment. Came in from West Georgia. Del McGee is getting guys that are immediately making an impact in his first season, which again, that has been the draw of this guy as a head coach since he'd had that one game at Southern. Everyone knew that like this guy's going to get you talent. And it's Ted Hurst was a guy I was not even on my radar coming into the season. To me, he was a depth wide receiver behind oh goodness. Kidakwa, and there's a handful of guys. Josiah's Cradle's still there. So he was like 4 or 5, but he's shown out, and that's because Del McGee was able to find this guy at Valdosta, find Xavier Wilson at West Georgia. It was fun to watch Vanderbilt play with Diego Paiva because that guy reminded me a lot of Darren Granger in that, shoot, the play was dead 3 seconds ago, but he's still moving. He's still finding a way to extend the play. So it was exciting. Don't read too far into this as a Georgia State don't take this to mean that Georgia State is better than Vandy or better than an SEC team, but do take it to mean that there is a shift, the shift that this team needed after losing Sean Elliott probably is here. A level of buy-in from players, a level of buy-in again from fans. We've talked about. I believe he's getting the campus more excited about this team, and a level of talent is going to come to this team that it's never had before.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody goes back and listens to last season's episodes, particularly last season's preview of Georgia State, and even kind of going back to when we were doing the Underdog Dynasty podcast talking about Georgia State, it just always felt like there was a real cap on their ceiling, like what they were able to accomplish. It always felt like 8-4 was like the absolute pinnacle of what they could accomplish. And I think given the time, I think Del McGee, kind of what you said, is going to be able to recruit a lot of guys in there that wouldn't have previously even given Georgia State a sniff under Sean Elliott. So I think the only main concern is if you guys do start, and this may be putting the cart before the horse a little bit, but if Georgia State does start succeeding, what happens if coordinators start getting poached? Because this is sort of what happened to some extent with Chad Lunsford at Southern, which was he was the recruiting guy. He was way less accomplished or qualified for the job than Del McGee was, but people loved him. He was a big recruiter. He did a great job on that side of things. But specifically when the offense at Southern got found out and people started kind of solving it, and then Shai Wertz leaves, then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, now I have to reload, and people have kind of figured out what the offense is. So like what do we do at that point? That may be further down the road a concern to have, but right now, yeah, I mean, we were talking about this team before the season winning what 3-4 games, 5
Hmm.
games tops at very best. So we'll see if they kind of continue to ratchet up throughout the season. But this was a great win for them.
Yeah.
Beating any SEC school at home is huge to even get a home and home scheduled, much less actually beat them. So
Yeah.
kudos to the Panthers because this was a really good one. Georgia State moves to 2-1 with the victory. Vanderbilt is now drops to 2-1. Getting to one last game here. We don't have to honestly spend a lot of time on this, but Southern Miss was down 28-21 at halftime against South Florida on Saturday and found a way to get outscored in the second half 21-3. They ended up getting beat by 25 at home, especially basically in the second half. Put another notch in the, getting ready to axe Will Hall. Like, this is another notch in that belt. So the fact that you were able to play that closely with a team that took Alabama to the limit for 3/4 for a half, and you just totally folded up shop in the second half. Like, I know South Florida's a better football team, but if you can put up that kind of fight in the first half, then you can muster something in the second half, and they just couldn't.
Hmm. Uh, we know where I stand on Southern Miss. Again, this is no secret. I think my
I
biggest thing
mean,
is
we're all in the same boat on
yeah,
Southern
yeah.
Miss. Like, I don't
I
think
think
nobody here is high on them.
right. I am. Did you watch any of this game, Brian?
So I caught a couple of plays. Um,
Because
I
I did not see a snap of this, and I'm seeing that Rodemaker was pulled. And I looked for
mhm.
injury news. I looked for like any sort of. I couldn't find anything out of that.
I think they just pulled him.
He wasn't performing poorly. 10 for 15, 120.
Dude, if you try to make heads or tails of Southern Miss's quarterback situation, like you're gonna give yourself an aneurysm.
Yeah.
So don't think about it too hard.
Yeah. I don't know. Like I said, I didn't watch a ton of this game. I didn't watch any of this game. And I sorry, Southern Miss fans. Your team sucks.
I mean, I watched some of the second half, but honestly, South Florida was just putting it on them in the second
Hmm.
half. So I was just like, I'll have this. I cannot watch the last quarter of this game, and I'll have the same take unless they mount like a huge. It was what 42-21 after 3/4, and I was like, I can flip it over to a more entertaining game than this. I actually watched the end of Georgia and Kentucky. Not a particularly entertaining game, but
Mm-mm.
I was like, it's closer than this. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, Southern Miss is just outclassed, but unfairly or unfairly, they're going to be outclassed by pretty much every team they play because they're not very good. So I don't really, Will Hall again needs to go ahead and get a packing truck ready because he's done so after this season. All right. So South Florida with the win is now 2-1. Southern Miss drops to 1-2 with the loss. So as we turn the page to week 4, let's go ahead and try to make some picks on these games. Starting Thursday, the day this is going to come out, so the game is happening that night. App State is welcoming South Alabama in to Boone. App is a 7.5 point home favorite. Over under 63.5. Something screwy is going to happen. I guarantee. For some reason, I'm going to take the bait and take App minus 7.5. But watch Fluff Bothwell run for 4 touchdowns, and I'm just sitting here left with my head in my hands, wondering what's going on.
Yeah. This will be a really interesting game to figure out what either of these teams actually are. And I think it is worth. It's one of those rare Sun Belt games that is worth watching over Thursday night football. Give me the under here, 63.5. I think that number is just stupidly inflated by South Al's performance last week. I don't. There's little to no chance both teams score 30 here.
Yeah, but you don't have to make a pick, but I just wanted to ask:
Mhm.
do you think App wins this game by 8 points?
I think App wins by. I would take South Al because I like App to win straight up, but not by 8.
All right, I'm changing my pick. I'm going to tail you and say the under
Yeah,
of 63.5.
it's
It's something about like if it was 6.5 for some reason mentally I'm like yes, but 7.5 I'm like why is it 7.5?
I don't know
South
where that
Alabama
extra
has
point's
showed
coming
very
from.
little. They don't want people to push is
Mhm.
essentially what it is. Um, my thing is like where is this South Alabama like benefit of the doubt kind of coming from? You know,
From scoring 70, 80 points last week.
yeah, but like look at that level of competition. I mean, look, South Alabama had Gio Lopez in week 1 and it
Mhm.
didn't help.
Oh, I don't disagree, but this is all out. There's not a person picking it by hand. This is all algorithm. When you score 80
Yeah.
points, this stuff isn't built for that.
No. No, you're right. Um okay, Saturday. For some reason the Fox Sports like big noon Saturday crew is at this game. Marshall, Ohio State. Ohio State is a 40.5 point home favorite. Over under is 51.5. I'm going to take the over. I think Ohio State could hit the over by themselves. I mean, they are a 40.5 point favorite and the over under is 51.5. So they're implying that like what Marshall scores 10 points maybe.
Yeah. Ohio State's 2-0. They've outscored opponents 108-6. That was Akron and West Michigan, which is frankly kind of the same level as Marshall. Give me God, 40 is just so rich. I like
It's
they
so many
will win by
points.
40, but we've got a competition here between ourselves. I can't put myself in that position. Give me the over as well.
Okay. Um Noon on ACC Network. Uh we have James Madison traveling to Chapel Hill to take on the Tar Heels. UNC is a 10.5 point home favorite. Over unders 47.5. I'm gonna take North Carolina and hope that the heads or tails on Alonza Barnett lands on tails this week.
Yeah, I
Um,
think go ahead. Sorry.
no, but he'll turn in one pretty respectable performance and then he'll turn around and turn something in and you're like, I don't understand this or why it
Mhm.
happened.
Yeah, I think Marion Hampton is just going to absolutely dice up James Madison. Give me 10.5 is way too low. Give me UNC.
Yeah. Um, all right. I wish Matt was on to discuss this next one. This would have been an interesting discussion because he has a soft spot for Tulane,
Hmm.
who's playing Louisiana at noon on ESPNU. I'm going to be tuned into this game. This is one of the more entertaining matchups I think of the year. Honestly, like I think this is going to be a really good test for Louisiana. That said, I'm taking Tulane -3 on the road. Um, Louisiana has looked good, not great so far. And I mean, who better to plan against Louisiana than a guy that just coached in the Sun Belt for Troy for 2 years?
Sure. Uh, Tulane is 1-2. Their one win over Southeast Louisiana, but then lost to Oklahoma and Kansas State. What's the over under here?
54.5.
54. That I don't want to touch this game on any of them. Uh, Give me Louisiana. I think sounds like you're a little tepid. I think Louisiana has done what they've needed to prove that they're probably the second best team in the conference this year. I like them at home. Give me Louisiana.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to pull up. So Louisiana's wins though have come against Grambling, who an HBCU in week 1, and then
Hmm.
they played Kennesaw State, who still has not really had time to adjust from going FCS to FBS.
No, but they've
So
done what's required of them in those games. Like what more did you want from them in those games?
no, I agree. I just feel like this is a real step up in competition for them.
Yeah.
Whereas I think the only hope, if you take the Tulane side of this, is that Tulane doesn't play down to them. I think
Hmm.
that's the big concern. because Tulane, again, has been tested by Oklahoma and Kansas State. So in theory, you would say, hey, you can take a lot more from those performances, even in losses, than you can beating the crap out of Grambling in week 1 or
Yeah.
whatever, and I understand Tulane beat Southeast Louisiana State or whatever, but yeah, I just feel like I've seen flashes from Tulane that I feel like would be something you can replicate in a closer game like this.
Yeah, I hear you.
So 2:00 here, ESPN Plus. Arkansas State is traveling to Ames to take on Iowa State. Iowa State is a 22-point favorite. Over/unders 51.5. Give me the under of 51.5. I think Arkansas State scoring the way they did last week against Michigan is a little bit of a fluke. I don't think Iowa State's quarterback situation is quite as bad as the combination of Davis Warren and Alex Orji, and Michigan somehow wanting neither of them to start, but having to pick somebody. So I'm gonna take the under 51.5.
I like the under as well. Iowa State scored as many points against North Dakota in week 1 as it did against Iowa in week 2. Give me the under.
All right. Another 2:00 ESPN Plus game here. Virginia is traveling to Conway to take on Coastal Carolina. Virginia is a 3.5-point road favorite. Over/unders 55.5. I'm gonna go under again. Like, I don't see where the points are gonna come from for Coastal. Like, unless Calandria for Virginia turns in one of the worst performances of his life at quarterback, which is what we've seen to be the winning formula when you play for Coastal, is you got to play a guy that's having one of the worst days of his life.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see how Coastal generates enough offense. And like, unless the turnovers are coming and those are turning into scores, I don't really see it.
Give me Virginia here. I think they win by a touchdown, maybe 10 even.
Okay. 3:00 here, a game that, I mean, I can't feel good about this. 3:00 ESPN Plus. Southern Miss is traveling to take on Jacksonville State. First one to throw 3 picks loses.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because Jacksonville State's quarterback situation is a mess. Southern Miss's quarterback situation is up in the air. We don't know who's playing, who's in, who's out, who's even injured. Man, I'm going under again. Like, I hate to just make a run of this, but like,
Yeah.
who's gonna score for Jacksonville State? Who's gonna score for Southern Miss?
No, I think that over under is coming from the putrid defense that we've seen from both of these teams, more so the fact than, oh my gosh, USM and Jacksonville State are both going to score 30. Give me Southern Miss. As low as I am on them, I've at least seen them win a game. Jacksonville State, obviously, again, it came against Southeast Louisiana. And Jacksonville State is yet to play an FCS school this year. They've played a far more, on level schedule, but I've seen Southern Miss win a game. I haven't seen Jackson State do it.
Another 7:00 or a 7:00 kick here, ESPN Plus. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this one. Troy will presumably pick up their first win of the season against Florida A&M.
I hope so.
Well, yeah. But like, I don't have a lot more to kind of contribute there. Like,
no,
it's kind of like, I don't love either of the quarterback options at Troy. You can't run the football effectively. Defensively, you're not where you were. I mean, but I think they'll have enough to beat Florida A&M. If they don't, it's gonna be dark days in Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
Getting to this next one here, this one actually has a line. SEC Network, 7:45 Eastern Time. Georgia Southern is traveling to Oxford to take on Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a 35-point favorite. Over under is 66.5. I don't know if you saw this. I had a tweet yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Georgia Southern is statistically through 3 games the 3rd worst rushing defense in the country. They are giving up, I think it was 237 yards per game on the ground, and they give up on average 6.5 yards per carry. Give me Mississippi minus 35. They're beating the crap out of teams that they play. And Georgia Southern, like, defensively doesn't have the horses to stick around.
I like Southern to cover here. I agree that Mississippi State is gonna run all over the Eagles, and I think it's gonna be pretty ugly. But at some point, I think Ole Miss is gonna have to put on the brakes. And obviously, putting on the brakes means running. And like you could argue that, well, this team can't defend the run, so even if they're just trying to run the clock out, they're going to keep scoring. I think it'll just become on Ole Miss side, handoff down the field for a 7-minute drive. Georgia State does the same thing, but through the air. Screenplay for a 6-minute drive. Shoot, there might not be 7 full possessions in the second half. Give me Southern to cover.
This game has, because I don't, obviously I don't write for Underdog Dynasty anymore. Like, this game has me cutting it off it during the middle of the third quarter, like, written all over it. Like, I will be like, all right, so it's 49-14 in the middle of the third quarter. All right, I'm gonna find something else to watch. Like, I'm sorry, guys. We have one of these a year that we play for money, and that's fine. It doesn't mean I have to watch the whole thing. I'm not the head coach of the team. So, last game of the night on ESPN Plus, UL Monroe is traveling into Austin to take on the number 1 team in the country, the Texas Longhorns. The spread is 40. Texas is a 44.5 point favorite. Over unders 52.5. I'm taking the over of 52.5. I could see Texas covering this by themselves, and that's not a knock on ULM. They are just not. They're not in the same stratosphere as Texas.
Yeah, I think quarterback play. I'm excited to really see Arch Manning. That's the real storyline here, more than anything else. Give me Texas to cover, but that is functionally the same pick you made. Frankly,
Art showed some wheels off last weekend.
Yeah,
very unmanning like of him.
I think, I mean, it's no secret they're in a very good quarterback situation there. I hope for Georgia's sake that he doesn't stick around, and I don't know.
I think it's going to happen.
I was hoping that he would be pissed off they didn't give him the job, but obviously he was behind Ewers. There's no chance. We're screwed.
Yeah, dude. I think the game against Kentucky kind of solidified that Texas is the number 1 team in the country, and they should be until further notice. All right, so that is the week that is going to happen in the Sun Belt. It's obviously going to happen the exact way we talked about it and the exact way we picked. After we were all so terrible picking last week, I think Matt and I each won like a game or two. Mm-hmm. And I think you were the best of the bunch, but I think you were still under 500 or right at 500.
You cursed me. You gave me my flowers last week, and then I went 3-5 on the picks.
Well, we weren't much better. So, I think it was just a weird week, and it was kind of weird to get it. I feel like I get a better temperature check once Sunbelt like play starts up. But when you're playing all these teams that we just don't have any context for, it's really hard to find something to kind of grab onto and be like, no, I know what's going to happen. So as we sort of wrap up here, let everybody know where they can find you on social media, and then we'll get out of here.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Zeke Palermo, ZekePalermo. That's where you can find me. I post about the pod. I post about high school sports now because I have a big boy job. Let's go. And yeah, you can find Matt at Miguez Matt on Twitter. Though he's not here, he doesn't deserve the plug. And Brian, send us home.
You can find the show on X at Warm Weather Fans. You can find me on X at Watch the Stone. Like I said, feel free to send us emails. We would love to take questions, comments. We may, if we feel like enough people are interested in it, we can also do a YouTube live stream one night where we do an episode live. Or if people have questions for us, we can field those on the air. We can kind of do whatever. Like even if we have to eschew a normal type of episode for more of like a Q&A, like that's totally fine with us as well.
That'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that would be great. But yeah, that is the week that was in the Sun Belt and the week that will be. Thank you everybody for joining us. Rate, review, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We will be back next week, hopefully with Matt in tow. This has been Warm Weather Fans, the Sun Belt Podcast.